Sansa was beside her, whispering something to her, but Arya didn't seem to hear. Her eyes were strange, as though she were staring at something very far away. Harry Karstark was holding little Torrhen's hand, and the boy was chattering on to Bran about the colors of all the horses he'd seen ride through. Rickon was last, and though of late he had made the decision that nothing and nobody interested him other than Shaggydoak, he too was excited by the arrival of the guests. The Dornish prince was tall and slender, with olive skin and thick black hair that was cut short, and a circlet with a diamond at the center that made his hair look darker, and his brown eyes deeper. A boy walked beside him, wearing a simple ringlet of gold over silver hair, with lilac eyes that marked him as Prince Viserys' son. Bran could not hear what Robb said to them, but he saw Daenerys let Sara down at last to kneel before the boy, and speak some quiet words to him. For a moment, he seemed shy, and then he hugged her, and let her kiss his cheeks. There was a fixed nature to his Prince Tristan's face as he stepped forward to greet each one of them, bowing when he reached Arya and taking her hand to kiss it, though from where Bran stood, it didn't seem as though his lips ever touched her skin. The prince repeated the similar courtesies to them all and withdrew quickly. Princess Rhaenys came next, with a girl child dressed in the Tully colors who could only be her eldest Betha. The Lady of Riverrun said something that made even Robb smile, and hugged Dany fiercely, and had some kind words for Arya and Sansa. Bran's mother embraced her too, and called her sister, hugging the child that was her niece, and when Rhaenys stood before him, Bran was reminded of Rhaegar, for their eyes were the same. "You look just like your uncle," she told him, with a smile. Perhaps it was because she was beautiful that Bran felt a blush creeping up his face. "Thank you, my lady," he said, uncertainly. "What about me?" Rickon asked, always butting in where he didn't belong. The princess laughed gently, "As do you." It was then that Prince Tristan emerged again, holding the reins to a golden sand steed, with a mane of copper. "A wedding gift, for my betrothed," he announced. Rickon's eyes grew wide. "Do we all get one?" "No, it's only for Arya," Bran replied. He thought of his Aunt Lyanna, who was the best rider out of them all, and wished she was here now. But she had stayed in her rooms, perhaps because it would be too awkward to greet Rhaegar's daughter while everyone watched. Arya stepped forward then, and took the reins. For a moment, she spoke to the animal, in a low, quiet voice, and then suddenly she was pulling herself up into the saddle, as though she wore riding clothes and not a gown. Bran didn't dare look at his mother, or Robb. Some of Winterfell's men laughed fondly, Harwin among them, but mostly they were all still, waiting to see what the prince might do. Prince Tristan called out to his own man then, who brought out another horse, this one the color of snow, with a mane so pale it seemed almost silver. He mounted it easily, with the skill of someone who was often in the saddle, and then he and Arya were off, slowly at first, and then both kicked their horses at the same time, and went off through the courtyard. In the days after, there were endless audiences after with the lords who had come from Dorne. There were Dalts and Gargallons and Eulas, and Illyrians and Manwadis, Corgyles and Blackmonts, and even Sands. It was Cregan who sat next to Robb in the Great Hall now, most days, to learn from him how Winterfell would be ruled, but Bran joined too, and sometimes even Rickon. The Dornishmen had their own tastes, Bran learned, and the musicians they brought with them played songs that had never been played in Winterfell's halls. Sansa listened to them raptly, and invited them to visit Carhold. They brought their own food too, all sorts of peppers that they would roast and grind down into a paste to flavor their dishes. If anyone passed too close to the kitchen in those days, the spice of them was enough to burn the eyes and nostrils. Robb couldn't withstand the taste, nor could most of the Northmen, but Cregan took to it quickly. The Knight of Lemonwood japed one evening that it was his Dornish blood, passed on through the Targaryen line. There were only a few men his age, the prince included. One was Edric Dane, a quiet boy with all the dignity of a lord, who carried Dorne at his side, and came before Robb on one knee to thank him for ensuring the return of the sword to his house. Bran was a good swordsman, he trained under Sir Roderick, practiced against his brother Robb and Jory Castle every day, and could hold his ground against most of Winterfell's men-at-arms. But when he asked Edric Dane to drill, he felt as though he was holding his sword with the wrong hand. The sword of the morning held back so Bran wouldn't humiliated before everyone watching. He was embarrassed all the same, and would have gone off to his room to sulk, but the sword of the morning was good-natured, and complimented him on his footing. Afterwards, they had stood for a while and spoken of sword fighting and starfall as the other men drilled. The day of the wedding, it was Robb who brought Arya into Winterfell September, and the sight of them together made Bran miss his father so much that his chest hurt. Septon Chayle lit the candles, and his sister and Prince Tristan made their vows under the gaze of the carved masks hanging from each wall. But it did not end there. The guests were led out to Winterfell's Godswood, and it was there, before the eyes of the Heart Tree, that Robb removed Arya's maiden cloak, and Tristan placed the new cloak around her shoulders, embroidered with the sun and spear of his house. Perhaps Robb thought Arya might do something to ruin it all, because it seemed like a great weight left his shoulders as they went at last to the great hall. He smiled as he danced with Daenerys, and afterwards danced with each of his daughters, balancing their little feet on his boots. Bran danced with Wylla first, and then Princess Rhaenys, then Sansa, and after that Dany. Even Samwell Tarly had come to watch. Bran would have preferred it better if it was Uncle Benjen who had remained in Winterfell, but liked the Black Brother all the same, who was good company when his head wasn't buried in books in Winterfell's library. The hall was a cacophony of singers and drunken men by the time it was his turn to dance with Arya. The food had been served then, and it was a rich feast by all accounts, but not when compared with Robb's own wedding, where course after course were brought out seemingly endless, or the harvest's feasts hosted by their father. Winterfell's treasury was not what it once was, and Mayor Stillowin had told him that Arya's dowry had cost them dearly. When he danced at last with his sister, she still had that faraway look in her eyes. Rickon thought you would run away. It was loud enough that he thought no one else could hear him. I was, Arya said, without shame. Why didn't you? I was going to go to Jon, but, she bit her lip. He would have sent you back. He wouldn't. He would have helped me. Their cousin had long kept Arya's secrets, but never one such as this. Maybe he would have returned her to Winterfell himself, atop his dragon. Or maybe he would have found her a ship to Braavos, or Pentos, or Myr. And then, when he was a child, Bran would have imagined 1,000 possibilities. But he knew too much now, and he could see how it would have ended. Perhaps Arya did too. So why didn't you go? He asked again. She bit her lip. King Aegon is Tristan's cousin. If I left, what if he did to Winterfell what he did in Highgarden? Bran should have offered to spirit her away, all the same. Or else, to protect her forever, like Aemon the Dragon Knight and Queen Naerys. Bran looked up at the dais, where the prince was speaking to Robb. He didn't seem evil. I'll protect you, Arya, he said, anyway. We can choose a secret word for you to put in your letters if he's hurting you, and I'll come to Dorne for you. That made his sister smile for the first time that day. Don't worry. I'll have Nymeria with me. And my needle. When he was 17 years old, Bran returned to Castle Black. Winterfell had begun to feel lonely for him, as it had only been once before, all those years ago when he had been left alone with Rickon and Cregan, before the Ironborn attacked and war had come. His sisters were gone, and his mother had gone too with Arya to Dorne so she wouldn't be lonely, promising to return after a year. He missed them, and missed their wolves, and it made all the worse knowing that he would married by the turn of the year too, and gone. It wasn't something that Rickon would understand, though, and for Robb, Winterfell would never be lonely, not with Dany and their children. Aunt Lyanna was the only one who might see things as he did, but it felt too cruel to compare him missing his sisters to her missing his father or his uncle Brandon. When he told her he would go visit Jon, and if she wanted him to deliver any messages to him, she had said nothing at all. But the day before his departure she had come to find him, and pressed a letter to his palm. The thought of venturing north took hold in one of his dreams. He had come to see that everything Lord Brynden had taught him was a skill, and like any other, it was honed through practice. But since the war ended, it was easier to forget how he was, what he was. His mother wanted him to, though she never said so, and Robb did too, so they could better protect him, and Bran had found it was easier to be a little boy again, or at least, to pretend. In his dreams, he let the visions come to him, like whispered secrets, and of late it was the children of the forest who walked in them. Bran had thought them all dead, but all sorts of things had been found, buried under the snow. Jon had written to them of wildlings his rangers came across in the north. One of his black brothers had been a wildling himself who spoke the old tongue, and said they had passed the winter hiding in tunnels and caves. They did not even know they walked on Stark land now. Robb had not wanted him to go, but neither would he forbid him. Bran was a man grown now, and could go where he wished, and he did not have to tell his brother of all people that he had been north before when he was still a child, and knew the way. It was a sunny day when Bran left Winterfell a horse, with Summer at his side. Most days they were alone, and it was then that he thought most of Hojan and Meera, though their path together had been altogether different. His was easier, he had only to follow the king's road. Other days, Daenerys' dragon flew in the sky above them, watching as they crossed over the stone bridges that spanned swift, narrow rivers, as he hunted with Summer, even as he slept beneath the moonlight. He might have wondered if Shadowtamer was hunting him, but he had reached a sort of understanding with the dragon years ago. When they looked each other, they both knew precisely what it was they were seeing. Before the war, the road was well traveled, with comfort to be found in rude inns. But all that was gone now. As was the wall. Bran had heard it said so often, but it was another thing to stand before Castle Black and see the horizon behind it and endless wild stretching out as far as the eye could see. It looked small, and vulnerable, still bearing the scars of war. A new tower had been raised and a few roofs were repaired, but there were great piles of stone where buildings had fallen, where the wall had fallen. Later, when he was sitting with his cousin before the hearth, with hot food in his belly, Jon told him that they had need of a wall to circle the castle and had begun breaking down and shaping the stones that form it. Too many of the builders had died, however, and the work was slow. The Lord Commander told him many things that were no doubt meant to reach Robb's ears, of the state of the other castles that were now under dominion of the Lord of Winterfell. He talked to him of Tormund Giantsbane, and Soren Shieldbreaker, and Eugon Oldfather, the Great Walrus, and the other wildlings who lived peacefully in Robb's lands. And he talked to him of those one day may not, who when spring had come had returned to their lands, in numbers too small to be of much threat, to brood over their losses, and try to carve out the life they had led long ago. Robb thought it was the fear of the dragons that kept them in place, the ones bonded to Daenerys and to Jon, whose flame and fury they knew too well. But Jon was of a different mind. He spoke of them as though they were men, no better and no worse than any other. They spoke of other things too, and in them they were cousins, and nothing more. They spoke of Arya and of her marriage, of Robb and Daenerys and his family, and of Aunt Lyanna. On his last night, they dined in Jon's chambers with Uncle Benjen, and Bran wished he could stay longer. But they parted in the morning, with Jon offering again to send Bran north with Black brothers to keep him safe, and Bran assuring him that he had no need. The way was clear in his mind, every step plotted out before him, not the panicked sprint of his youth, when death hunted them, but deliberate. At times, it was even beautiful. It would always be cold here, even in the height of summer, but it was nothing like before. The snow was a thin layer, peppering the ground and the trees, and in places giving way to great green meadows, and lakes and ponds teeming with fish. He did not have to think twice when he came at last upon the great weirwood. It was altogether different now. The leaves were as red as blood against the blue sky, rustling gently in the wind, and up in the branches birds had nested, not Lord Bryndon's crows but birds of all colors, singing their songs. At the mouth of the cave, he left his horse, lit his torch and descended, Summer jumping down after him. There was no one there to guide the way, now, but he remembered. He walked beneath the earth, over and through the roots of a weirwood tree, from chamber to chamber until he reached its heart, where Lord Bryndon had once taught him his lessons. His throne was empty now, as Bran knew it would be. Whatever his teacher had been, was gone, though sometimes, if he listened closely, he could find that piece of his soul that was still in the world. "Summer, you stay," he told his wolf, and climbed into the seat. Bran saw himself as he would be, or perhaps, was always meant to be, as Lord Bryndon would have been in the first few years of his reign, with weirwood roots beginning to grow around him and Summer both, to wrap around them limbs and pull them into its gentle embrace. The whole world unfurled before him, then, past the weirwoods, past even the eyes of beasts. He could see the faces of all the dreamers who had been and were and would be, and knew he only had to reach out and wake them. But Bran was ever looking at things best left undisturbed, at grains of sand that had no meaning at all, not with the multitudes that were before him. He saw Robb, leading a search party from Winterfell for him, and saw him fall, taking an arrow to the heart at the foot of the Frostfangs, the bow wielded by raiders from the mountain passes, who had argued over whether to take him and his men hostage, before the archer took the decision. He saw war bloom again, in 100 places at once, as the Northmen avenged their lord, and rooted out the wildlings who lived in their lands, until the ground tasted of blood. Winterfell was a place for grief and tears then, and when it threatened to drown all he had loved, the king came north, for the last time. The princess shed her mourning clothes then, and traded them for a crown. Bran saw the High Septon place it on her head, saw her belly bloom and the heir to the Iron Throne born, and more after him, and with them, dragons hatch. Their mother's heart was so broken that it burst into his vision. He saw her grow old, before her time, and die in her bed. And death followed death followed death. It was his Aunt Lyanna next, and his Uncle Benjen after, and then his cousin Jon, who left chaos in his wake. War bloomed again, and waned and bloomed, and his siblings all bore it all alone, flung into different parts of the world. He saw Cregan grow, into the man he knew he would be, and set out north, as Bran had done, all alone save for his sword and his horse. In the fist of the first men, he found Jon's dragon and claimed it, and made the north anew, in fire and blood. None of it frightened him. He could change it with a word, if he wished, with a gesture. He could rise from the chair now, and those visions would melt away into ether, and new ones would rise in their place. In one of them, he journeyed further north, to seek out the children as he had meant to do. On the far shores of the world, where Daenerys had once sat with her back against a tree, screaming in agony as she brought her daughter into the world, he would find them, and bring them back to Winterfell. He saw himself, many a night, sitting at their side, learning all the old magic from them, and retreading his path north to raise new castles there, as his namesake had, and weave new spells into their foundations. Robb would name new lords for those castles, and slowly their lands and seas would fill, with farmers and sailors and builders. He would return home though, to marry Wylla, to have children and be a lord to his people, as he said he would. Bran could see much and more, if he wished. It was easy as turning his head, this way and that. He had only to decide. The end.